That will never happen. Those 4 words from his first grade teacher dashed Michael Phillips' dream of becoming a lawyer. Those words also shut down Michael's dreams altogether and started him on a path of self-destruction.
Author and pastor Michael Phillips is an advocate for social justice and education reform. Yet because of his early struggles with the criminal justice system, he almost became just another statistic. After a series of devastating losses in his life, Michael abandoned his faith and turned to dealing drugs. He was arrested and faced the possibility of years in prison until a judge gave him a second chance. In Michael's book, Wrong Lanes Have Right Turns, he shares his incredible story of escape from the school-to-prison pipeline and encourages others to embrace their God-given purpose to change lives and revitalize communities.
Please welcome to the 700 Club, Michael Phillips. Michael, it's wonderful to have you with us.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you for having me.
You know, children are so innocent, and we all begin dreaming when we're very young about life and what we'd like to be. Take us back to that first grade classroom. How did a remark by your teacher shut your dreams down?
Yeah, just like any child having great dreams of becoming something that they aspired to be, I had those dreams. And in first grade, which is far too early, those dreams were crushed by the words that will never happen. My first grade teacher told me it was impossible for me to become a lawyer. The sad thing about that is that when I decided to talk back, if you will, and suggest that it is possible for me to become a lawyer, because my grandmother told me I could, my mother told me I could, my father told me I could. I was almost suspended for standing up for myself and believing in the dreams that were in my heart.
That was the beginning of many attacks on you as a child, on your faith. You had your dreams squelched at 6. You saw a murder happen right in front of you at 10. At 12, your dad died. Your father's death had, as you would expect, tremendous impact on you. You began delivering drugs on the street. Why did you also turn against God?
Well, there was no explanation for my father's death. At a tender age of 12 years old, at his funeral, the preacher gets up and says, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away." And those words sank in my heart as if God was the culprit in the death of my father. No one simply told me that my dad's health was poor and that, he didn't take care of his body and he was overweight and he had hypertension and all these factors that contributed to his heart attack. But they simply put it on God. And at 12, I couldn't understand that. And there was no context to those words. If the preacher would have said, "This is Job trying to reconcile loss in his life," instead of putting the words of Job in God's mouth, then maybe perhaps I would not have become so angry. But that anger towards God and towards faith was the result of losing my father, because he was my hero. So I didn't want anything to do with church, anything to do with God.
A basketball scholarship became your ticket to college and to moving out of an area that you were raised in that in many ways challenged your opportunity and who you were. Then that opportunity was ripped away from you. Talk about that.
Yeah, I came home for, not even a semester into college. I came home for a weekend visit, just excited about the fact that I had arrived to where I had arrived to, that I made it through all of that trauma, because often when trauma goes unacknowledged, tragedy goes uninterrupted. And the fact that I made it to this point was amazing. And so I went home for a weekend visit and went out with some friends. And early in the wee hours of the morning, the gentleman that was driving me fell asleep behind the wheel. And we had a horrific car accident. The lower half of my body was caught underneath the dash of the car, and the upper half, the upper torso of my body went through the windshield. So half of my body's in the car, half of my body's out of the car, and completely crushed the right side of my leg, broken tibia, fibula, a few bones in my foot. I woke up in the hospital when I became conscious, and the report was that I would never walk again and certainly never play sports again.
Yeah, you were in a hard place there. And again, you went back to what had become a familiar way for you to handle disappointment and discouragement and loss in your life. You started dealing in drugs again and a number of other things. Finally, you were arrested. You faced actually 30 years in prison, but a door opened unexpectedly and you got a second chance. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I thought my destiny was going to be written on those cinder block walls and that my purpose was going to be paved on those concrete floors. The moment they shut that jail cell, I thought it was over, but it wasn't. On a Sunday of all days, and if you have any dealings with the criminal justice system, you know this doesn't happen, but on a Sunday of all days, the correctional officer came to get me out of my cell after serving 6 months of pretrial detention. And they put me in a van and took me to a federal building and sat me before a judge. And the judge simply said, "Son, you have an option. You can either go to jail or you could go to school." And certainly, I looked right back at him and said, "Sir, I'll choose college." And they shipped me off to Oral Roberts University in a program at that time called Give Me a Chance. And I believe it was ran by a man by the name of Bill Owens. And they allowed me to go to college instead of to go to prison. And it changed my life forever.
Yeah, your story is such a picture of redemption. You were given that second chance, and still, even at ORU, you continued selling drugs until you attended Spring Revival. Tell us what happened to you there.
Yeah, you really can't be restored until you know you are forgiven. And for so long, I carried the pain and the trauma of all of my past troubles. And I wasn't able to transform that pain, only transmit that pain. And so at ORU, they had a spring revival, which was mandatory. You had to attend. And I really didn't want to feel God's presence. I grew up in church. I knew what God's presence was, and I didn't want to feel it. So for the first time in my life, I actually decided to actually smoke some marijuana. And I got as high as I could off of it. And drank as much as I could without stumbling. And I went to church in that posture. And they sat me on the third row in this revival and started to sing "How Great Thou Art." And in a matter of seconds, I was sober completely. And all that pain and all that frustration was gone from my life. And I was in God's presence. And it terrified me so much that I literally ran out of the chapel with all those thousands of people up the middle aisle and ran back to my dorm room just to escape God's presence. But I couldn't get away. He followed me right to that room. And I had an encounter with God there.
You did, for 3 days. You know, we're out of time, Michael. I'm frustrated because people need to read the book because there's so much more than just what we've talked about. And you talk in the book so much about the power of purpose in the lives of people, knowing what your purpose is, and it's worthy of it. Also, I want to say, if you're somebody who wants to understand, have a better understanding of some of the racial divide that exists in our country, you need to read this book. The book is called Wrong Lanes Have Right Turns, and it is available wherever books are sold. Michael Phillips, thank you. Wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
Great to be here. God bless you.